Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Am reading video for Friday, March 13th, 2020. Kind of a weird time to have superstitious days sneaking up on us. And also, I seem to be almost completely out of battery, so hopefully I can make this short and sweet. The book I'm the furthest along in is an audiobook, actually, of Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. Last week I talked about reading her first book, and I'm on a roll with reading Celeste Ng, ostensibly because Little Fires Everywhere is actually being turned into a mini-series on Hulu that's starting up next week, so I'll leave the trailer down below. Little Fires Everywhere takes place in Shaker Heights. I was very confused about the plot because there's a lot kind of going on. The major storyline is sort of this push and pull between these two mothers. This sort of upstanding liberal bastion citizen, Mrs. Richardson, as she's often referred to, who is has a fair amount of money and standing in the community, and she has a home to rent to tenants, and she rents it to Mia Warren, who is this portraiter with a young daughter and sort of a nomad, and kind of like the complete opposite of Mrs. Richardson in that she's not established and all of that, and kind of lives by her own rules and kind of ruffles Mrs. Richardson's feathers that way. But on top of all of that, their kids start getting involved with one another, and so that kind of ruffles their feathers a bit about like, hey, are you rejecting my, lifestyle here? And then on top of that, there is the thing I thought about the most before reading this novel, which was about a friend of Mrs. Richardson adopting a Chinese baby who was sort of left like at a fire station by her mother, who was this beleaguered immigrant, barely been in the country, abandoned by her boyfriend, kind of running out of options, didn't really know what was available to her as a struggling mother. But now she's kind of gotten her feet under her again, at least much more so than she did, and she would like to have the baby back. So there is this big custody trial happening, and Mia Warren and Mrs. Richardson and their families are on different sides of it, and this entices Mrs. Richardson to go digging into Mia's past about why she's so gung-ho to help this Chinese immigrant, because it seems to be very personal to Mia, and her backstory pretty much implies that it is very personal to her, this idea of motherhood and second chances, and I'll try to stop the spoilers there. And I mostly like this book. I guess I'm on the side with most people who seem to really fall for this book. There's a couple things I might have done differently. One of the big things that stands out is a little subplot with Mrs. Richardson's youngest daughter, Izzy, and her racist teacher, and how a prank went down. I thought that was kind of convenient, but that's kind of small potatoes within the wider issues happening here. I don't know, I go back and forth with how I think Ng is portraying people, all of her characters. She kind of goes back and forth between various characters, and she has this really big and very polarizing issue about adoption and motherhood and heritage going on. And I mean, I could see why this is a book club pick, because this could really get conversations roiling, and I've had a few just in my own head. And sometimes I feel like Ng isn't sympathetic enough maybe to adoptive parents and that sort of thing, but maybe I'm being a little harsh, and I do think she has taken the time. She has this sort of omniscient narrator who actually has given a bit of a sympathetic backstory to everyone, which to me, this is something I very much appreciate in contemporary fiction, where people are multifaceted. I much prefer stories where there's no mustache twirlers. Everyone's kind of trying to do their best. It's just that, you can't be best all the time. Your instincts aren't always as noble as you might think, or as self-sacrificing, or as altruistic, or as good for your children as you might think they are. And so I do think this novel on the whole is getting that down pat for the adults and also for the teen characters. This novel takes place when I was a teen, back in the 90s. I think Ing is only a few years older than me, so she's, raking back on that time period, and it's making me a little nostalgic for some things. One thing I like is that the oldest daughter, Mrs. Richardson's oldest daughter, Lexi, I don't know, I go back and forth on her character. She seems a little too Valley Girlish, but every now and then there's something to complicate her more, or maybe just to, endear her more to me, particularly that she listens to Alanis Morissette. So I had to chuckle a bit when I'm listening to one of the Hulu trailers where Alanis is in the background. Anyway. I've started reading some reviews, actually, of the miniseries, because I guess some of the critics have gotten early teasers, and they seem to be a little bit meh. I think there might be a little melodrama that gets teased out a bit more in the adaptation than it is in the book, I think. I think that's one of those things about adaptations versus novels, where you really just can't get into people's heads as much. I don't know, and the visual medium is perhaps a little more demanding about showing something conflicting, or I don't know. Anyway, I shouldn't judge too much. I haven't seen the miniseries yet. I'm technically not even finished with the audiobook. I have 2 CDs left in 9. I'm planning to finish it Friday. Of course, I'm filming this a little early. And I'm looking forward also to watching the miniseries. It's going to be a fun March for me, I think, between this and Plot Against America and Story of a New Name, the Elena Ferrante novel. Fun times, dramatic fun times. Speaking of dramatic fun times, I suppose, I'm also not nearly as far into this book as I'd like to be, but maybe I can finish it Friday, at the end of the day Friday, maybe? I don't know. This is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, her 3rd published novel, and the March pick for Toni Morrison 2020, the Voxer group started by Hannah from Hannah's Books, where we're talking each month about Toni Morrison's novels in chronological order. And one of the nice things I like about this particular printing of novels, the Vintage International, is that Morrison wrote introductions to these books, sort to the first 3 anyway, and for this one she talked about how she was inspired by the passing of her father, and this is the first time she's had a male as a main character, and this has inspired her to do a more chronologically traditional timeline, which frankly I'm kind of like, shoo! It's easier to follow. And yet she doesn't, negate any of her amazing female characters. The ones that particularly stand out to me are the protagonist's aunt and his first and second cousins, who all live together as these sort of kooky, eccentric women who run a wine house. And, just like with characters in the other novels, you just feel like you're a fly on the wall. The cadence, the rhythm of their speech, and how it infers so much about their characters and even their differences from one another. For example, like Reba is kind of more of a simpleton than her mother or her daughter, it seems like, and wants more attention, especially from the opposite sex, where the other two are much more okay with being individualistic and strong, and Pilot, who is the main character's first cousin, really has this backbone of steel that I think you'd see it also in characters like Sula in the past. And of course Morrison is enjoying putting in all of these names. I think that might indicate something both cultural about the Black community and also something perhaps archetypal. Like I keep thinking of magical realism and fairy tales, like, Pilate, named for Pontius Pilate, the man who was integral in, putting Jesus on the cross. And she was named as such because her mother died in childbirth. So, and then her brother has 2 daughters who are named after religious themes, and then the main character, Milkman, it's a different sort of story. It's because of sort of a relationship issue that his mother forced on him, where, his mother was nursing him for a long time, and so he got the name of Milkman. And basically this book is to follow Milkman's life. And right now he's still pretty much a young man where I am, but I think I have a ways to go in seeing how he might progress even beyond, the family he was born into, I guess. I mean, as just a son. His father, who is Macon Dead, is a huge force in his life right now, and Macon Dead is like one of the, in a long line of Macon Deads, or actually the second Macon Dead. His own father was a slave, and when he became a freedman and, registered basically as a freedman, the person who took his information was drunk, and he said, like, that he was born in Macon and that his own father was dead, so they put down his name as Macon Dead. So yeah, again, this is just sort of so resonant with history and culture, all of these names. And I mean, they live on Not Doctor Street, which has its own sort of history and backstory that even is directly involved with the Dead family, because the Negro doctor was Milkman's grandfather from his mother's side. Yeah, it's a rich, hearty book. It's difficult to describe in detail because it's character-based. It's not really entirely plot-based. It's about getting to know these characters and how they interact and what it says about the world around them. I do think there might be more overtly political stuff in this book. Already we've had the community's reaction to the murder of Emmett Till in mid-century. But anyway, I'm really getting into the red with my battery. I'm just going to go ahead and say that it's going to be a compelling read and compelling to talk about on the Voxer. And finally, next on my docket is Trick Mirror, Reflections on Self-Delusion by Gia Tollentino, which is a book of essays about pop culture, I believe, or perhaps just modern American culture told through the perspective of this New York Times writer. And that's all I'll say about it, because I am reading it for the BookTube Prize, where I am an official judge for the Octafinals. So I have to read and judge these books, and I can't talk about them in much detail until probably early April. But in the meantime, if you're curious about the BookTube Prize, where we're whittling down 2019 releases in fiction and nonfiction to pick favorites, I'll leave links down below. So that about covers it for me now. I guess I'm gonna do hopefully a quick little outro here before the camera completely shuts down on me. I feel like we're all sort of in the same boat together now. I mean, if you're watching this in the near future, my head is taken up with coronavirus stuff. Most of my plans and local happenings have been canceled or postponed or what have you because of the coronavirus, which is affecting all of us around the world. Hopefully, if somebody in the future is looking at this, it'll just be something that we had to get through in the past, but for now, we're in the middle of it, so hoping everybody stays safe this weekend. My own parents canceled a trip to New York, thank goodness really, for my father's birthday. Not sure if I'm going home or not for that. Just because of travel and everything, and I live in an area where I have to take public transit all the time. So it would be a nice time to self-quarantine, I guess. I always have a lot of reading and writing I want to get done. So I hope you all stay safe, and remember to wash your hands and not touch your face, and especially for those of you on public transportation like me, to try to not touch too many surfaces, especially with your bare hands and all that. Hopefully we can get through all of this together. So I'm thinking of everyone on BookTube, hoping that you're staying safe and hopefully cuddling up with a good book in the meantime. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.